to the second day of Get Set Startup Student Entrepreneurship Development Program. For the benefit of all those who missed the first day of the program, a short brief. Yesterday, Mr. Rajesh Khosla, President and Chairman of AG Glasspack, addressed the students and shared his thoughts about entrepreneurship. The mentor on the day one was Miss Urvashi Bed, Director of AMIL. She spoke about the idea and ideation. Today's distinguished mentors are Captain Amaya Kochar, founder of Proforce, and the second mentor is Captain Rahul Rai, founder of Armor Heavy. Both the mentors would be talking about finding co-founder and bootstrapping. Now, I hand over to Amaya Kochar.
Thanks a lot for this. I have been looking forward for this kind of an opportunity. I'm happy that I have also joined by here with Major Rahul Roy, who happens to be once a successful entrepreneur out there. I'm sure the views that I would probably give out here might be in a lot of agreement with Major Rahul Roy as well. And the greatest of the mentor is right there on the screen, Major Sunil Shetty, who happens to be a big, strong support to my venture also. And I've learned a lot through.
Thank you, Amaya and Major Rahul Roy. Thank you for joining. And as we wait for a Reference Globe team to join us, I thought I'll take this opportunity to quickly, let our audience know about the two startups that you represent. I'll start with Armor Heavy. Rahul, do you want to talk about what is Armor Heavy all about? The name is so militarish, right? Armor and Heavy.
I was saying that thanks for the opportunity. It's a great platform, I think, for youngsters. We need to be very proper. So many eyes watching us. A little about Armor Heavy. I think the vision of the brand is to be an aspirational brand, because of late, about 70 odd years, the aspiration in fashion per se has lied with the Western countries. A lot of these youngsters who are there on the program, I'm sure, are wearing all the multinational brands because the aspiration we've not been able to create in India. With Armor Heavy, I think 2 years down the line, all these youngsters who are there, they'll grow and they would consider Armor Heavy as one of the aspirational brands that they want to basically don and look smart in. So that's the very simple vision that we have.
Yeah, very rightly said, Rahul. Amaya, your startup is into sports, and with Olympics, India has had a decent performance this year. Tell us about your startup, Proforce.
Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot for this wonderful opportunity. I keep looking forward for connecting to youngsters and young entrepreneurs typically on this aspect. To be telling a bit about Proforce. Proforce is into holistic sports education, working in the K-12 segments. The aim is to actually nurture a sports talent right in the grassroots ages. And that is where we have been doing currently, been working with more than 24 schools and more than 40,000 children in the Western India segment, typically with Mumbai, Pune, Surat, Belgaum are the cities that have been covered currently. And going forward, is basic vision of Proforce is to actually have a talent representing in 2028/32 in 6-7 core games that Proforce wants to really get onto at the school level. Today, we've been fortunate that we've been able to produce talent up to national levels in under 14 and under 16 categories, even in individual games like fencing. So now that we have CA Bhavani Devi representing India in Olympics in fencing as the first fencer of India, but the Proforce has been behind fencing for last 4 years plus, and one of the very first company in Mumbai to start fencing at the school level. So we also have a decent talent lineup thereafter, with some of the players getting prepared even for the Commonwealth Games ahead. And I can proudly say that 90% of them are girls typically today in fencing.
Well, Captain Amaya, I'm looking forward to the day when the students trained by you, the sports people trained by you, bring gold to India.
Amen,
that will be great. Yes, I'm looking forward to that. Gentlemen, I think Reference Globe Director CEO is joining us. As soon as he joins in, we'll start. In the meantime, Rahul, As I said, the brand name looks very military-ish, armor heavy, and you are from the armored core, isn't it? What did you bring from your experience into the product that you make, which is sports gear?
Uh, Armor Heavy, you know that the digital properties these days are very, very saturated. I mean, if today I go and look for something which is like anything, any random thing, maybe amaya.com, it would have been taken. So I was actually struggling for a name, because the saturation is so much in the digital property that somebody or the other is using that name somewhere else. So for fashion, it's so very critical that you have a .com, not a .co, not a .in. .com is so very important because it gives that authenticity. When I shortlisted a lot of names like stealth and something to do with a little bit of armor, but everything was taken. Atom Sports, everything was taken. So then I said that let me go to a corner where a lot of civilians don't go. And what is that corner? And that corner is basically military, right? And let's open the tactical and strategic level kind of books. And then, of course, this term that we normally use in the military, in the combat team and combat command level, motions that when we are attacking in conventional scenes, we use this term armor heavy, which basically means the undefeatable, because it's so heavy in the battle tanks that the battle tanks actually go and they destroy the enemy defenses, and they ramrod in, and the entire blitzkrieg that was coined by the German army. So this term armor heavy was not taken anywhere across the world. So I secured the .com and the .in and the .co.in and like that, right? The British spelling and the American spelling. So you need to secure that digital. And fortunately, there are about 56 odd brands with the name Armor. However, and some names are very famous also. However, Armor Heavy wasn't taken. So I said that being an Armored Corps officer, what better service can I do when I've left the Armored Corps than being so close to the Mud Corps and keeping my brand name Armor Heavy? It looks very fantastic. It looks very strong. So there you go. I had a very good brand name with a very good aspirational kind of a meaning to it, which is the undefeatable, and it fitted in really well with the brand architecture and the visual appeal. If you see the armor heavy shield, I could actually develop it with some Devanagari kind of a script treatment and make it a shield. So the entire story stitched together rather well. So we had that brand name. I think it'll be the next Nike from India.
Well, we hope, we want to see that. And also, I like the way you kind of, you came up with your logo, which more looks like the Superman kind of
Yeah,
look and
like
feel
the
to it.
shield. I won't even
So,
go there to
yeah,
the Superman, but it looks like the shield. And sir, thanks a lot for
look like a shield.
introducing me to Captain Amaya. I think I'm not very sure about the course. Otherwise, I would have served him. But definitely over the course of the conversation, we'll exchange when we were commissioned, etc. And the protocol will fall right.
That can always take place later, maybe in this case.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
So,
uh,
gentlemen, I know just for the benefit of all the young aspiring entrepreneurs who are here, what is that you brought in from your army training and army experience into entrepreneurship? Amaya?
I guess we have. So if I got to tell this in one word, it's resilience. It's like the journey so far, and I'm sure it must be with at least 95, 98% of the entrepreneurs. The journey is never so smooth. So every time you got to really be that resilient to come up with an alternative, to come up with a little more flexibility, to come up to show. So just to give an example, before COVID was to hit, I think I used to tell all my fellow entrepreneurs, my ex-company bosses, those who are in touch with all my mentors, that I think I am in the safest of the industry so far, because the education in India is not gonna die. The education industry, as far as the schools are concerned, is growing with 144% constant average growth rate year on year. And in every 2 months or 3 months, you see one or two schools coming up in every gully nook of India. So as far as the schools are coming up, I am in the safest of the way. Nobody had ever thought that COVID was to get stuck and the school's gonna get shut for more than 18 months altogether. So I believe had it not been resilience to have faced that, or had it not been the resilience that is actually taught in the army to have come up to be or to show that kind of a grit to still carry on, I think this could have been a breaking down point for majority of us.
So I think we are joined by Reference Globe director. I'll step out and let him in so that he can address the gathering.
All of that.
Over to you, Reference Globe.
Hello, everyone. Hope everyone is staying safe. And thank you so much for giving us an opportunity to, collaborate with these many students and the great people, the guests for today. And I feel very privileged, to be part of the session. And in this session, there are students, there are aspiring entrepreneurs, there are, faculties who join this session. So once again, I very warm welcome you, all of you. As you know, Reference Globe is an edutech company, and we are connected with more than 1,000 colleges, universities across India, even degree colleges. And we help the colleges, universities, and degree colleges with efficient digital student transformation. And we do a lot of, useful events for the students. Let's say, for example, we have conducted artificial intelligence workshop by real-time experts, IoT workshop with real-time experts, and right now we are doing an entrepreneurship development program, which is really helping, not only the student, even the faculty members or someone with, 15 to 20 years of experience in the education domain. So like this, going forward, we are also going to do a lot of activities. And Reference Globe, as I said, it initially started with training and placements platform. And now that it has matured in such a way that, we can provide a one-stop solution right from admissions to alumni. You can automate complete business activities in a cost-effective way. So, this is about ourselves. So please stay tuned with us. In future also, we are going to come up with a lot of entrepreneur workshops and a lot of practical workshops, which will not only help the students, even the aspiring entrepreneurs, and even you can get updated like what's happening within the industry. Yeah, thank you so much for giving us this opportunity. I'd like to hand over the session to the respective speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Reference Globe, for that. I'll just quickly finish the question that I had started with. What did you bring from your learning or experience from the army into entrepreneurship? Rahul, with that, I want you to answer that, and then Amaya can take over for the session.
So I think I run my organization like a military unit. I would have been a CO had I been in the in the military. So from the get-go, I think everything that you do and have learned in the military translates into how you want to do a business. For example, reconnaissance. Now, reconnaissance, it's so very critical. Reconnaissance is all about gathering intelligence. In the business scenario, it's all about intelligence, whether it's from the competition or otherwise, market intelligence. So it's very, very similar. Now let's go to the could be a conk area of forward zone, FZDL, that we typically call it. Now the FZDL is basically the posturing, which is the social media and how you posture yourself. So I think then of course the quality and the logistics part. Then you've got how you dress your business. I think from the minor SD to the major, I think everything the army teaches you translates into how an entrepreneur needs to be. I mean, if you take it that way. So I think to answer your question, in totality, whatever I've learned in the military is taking shape in the CV street also, and more so in my entrepreneurial journey.
So you basically started off with the nuts and bolts, and it got everything that you learned in the armed forces
everything.
to be, you're applying it onto your
everything.
business.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure the students and aspiring entrepreneurs who are part of this program today, they would get to learn a lot from two of our esteemed guests, Captain Amaya and Captain Major Rahul. Before I hand over to Captain Amaya for the session, I also want to inform all the students that last 3 days for the demo day, where you can come up with your ideas, you can present your ideas, and the jury would be looking into the idea, and you'll get to pitch your idea on the last day. And the ones which get selected will be incubated, virtually incubated by Ask Mentor. So with that, I hand over to Captain Amaya. Captain Amaya, over to you.
Thanks a lot, sir. I am sure that I've been joined by many of my young students, young entrepreneurs or monopreneurs, as we call them as, and I would take this opportunity to share a bit of quick presentation, which would probably cover today's topics for me, are like finding a co-founder or bootstrapping, and I would go on relating whatever that is there on the slide with whatever Proforce as a company, which is my own startup, has gone through so far. So it might look more relatable. It might probably make a little more sense to all those who are listening to. My request to the audience is we will have a question and answer sessions at the end, and I'll be happy to answer as many queries as possible out there if time permits. Let me just run through the whole thing smoothly, and then slide by slide we'll go on. We'll go through the case study also as we would want. Thanks a lot to My Startup TV and everyone out here. I am joined with my fellow panelists as well, those who have had their own rich experience in the entrepreneurship, and my mentor himself, Major Sunil Shetty out there. So Proforce today stands for Holistic Sports Education in K-12 segment. We have been in existence since 2015 as a first financial year, or a first academic year as we call it in the K-12 segment typically. Started off with research of 3.5 years behind it before starting, and or I would say 4 years before starting. There was reason enough. Whatever research that we did was good enough. We'll go on covering these topics as we go ahead with. And today when we started off with just 2 pilot schools in Mumbai. We have more than 30 schools handled today, and more than 40,000 children under umbrella in 16 different sports that have been handled so far. In achievement segment for the sports, I would say Proforce has had 3 national medals in fencing, all girls. Proforce has had 3 national trophies in hockey, 48 state and district trophies so far, and 580 state and district medals. We would have scored much more had the COVID not been stuck in the right time. So last about 18 months, there hasn't been a competition, there hasn't been an achievement out there for this. Just a brief of what I am and what do I stand for today. I would not spend a lot of time on this. Here comes a very usual, very common, but still a very logical question. Is it going to be a sprint or is it going to be a marathon? At many times, at many case studies, you all will come up with a possible suggestion that, okay, it's got to make some quick money. It's got to probably rise in a valuation. It's got to scale to a level where it would be valued, or you can probably head for an IPO, or where many bigger investors would put in money. But it necessarily does not create a benchmark for. Every industry is different, every business module is different, every vision is different, we say, every aim is different. So it need not be the same way with which somebody else has carried it forward. Going forward, if I were to benchmark myself to the industry that I operate in, there have been companies, those who got their first investment after 11, 12 years. Proforce has been lucky to receive their first angel investment in the very first year of a launch of its operation, and thereafter also have been consistently receiving the angel investor support. We haven't gone ahead with any what we say seed stage or pre-seed, or for that matter stage A or stage B kind of investment so far, because we wanted to actually grow it to that scale and then go forward for. Proforce categorically today is with B2B segment, a couple of vertical of it, which is like when we call it as holistic sports education, a couple of verticals like nutrition guidance and health assessment of a child, or a growth assessment of a child, and some of its adventure camps are the B2C verticals that Proforce typically operates in. Somebody is playing with the screen, that's okay. We may probably remove that option. I may probably tell supposed to remove that option out here. Okay. The question for any entrepreneur before even he or she wants to plunge into entrepreneurship is the question why. I insist a lot. I've been a guest faculty at some of the entrepreneur schools, including Symbiosis, and that is where I would say the whole strength or the whole competence or the whole future of your startup or of your company is going to be. If your question why is answered well, why could be anything. This why could be anything. But what we generally come across, or what I generally come across in the youth segment, typically all those who want to start immediately after colleges or immediately after their uh, degree certificates or immediately after a couple of year experience, are these four common reasons that you can see on the screen. One is probably the idea is great. Yes, idea could be great. Ideas are always great. But at the same time, when you are thinking of one idea, trust me, friends, there are at least 100 people out there in the world, those who are thinking on the same idea, or those who have thought on the same idea, or probably already have started executing the same at the same time. I'm saying it again, at the same time. You are thinking of a great idea today. Trust me, there are 100 more people who are thinking of a great idea. So idea does not make a startup. There is a huge difference between an idea and a startup per se. The other reason that I come across is we four of us were friends, and we two of us are roommates, and we have a huge bonding, and that is where we thought we should start something of our own. Absolutely doesn't make sense, because the journey is not going to be friendship. There are gonna be probably the battles of money out there. There are gonna be the red lines out there. There are gonna be a lot of banging your head against the wall out there, and friendship only as a matter probably will not make you survive on that. Typically with people with 40, 45, I come across is they would have probably spent 10 or 15 years in the corporate or 20 years in the corporate, and now too bored of driving the same line out there, or they would have probably hit the glass ceiling and do not know what do they do there with their life. That's what we call it as midlife crisis. And that is the reason they think that, we should start something right now. That's something could be anything based on their experience, but that is not necessarily always a reason for which one should start. Many of the time, some of them succeed also, but lot many probably go through a lot of difficulty, and those startups get shut down as well. What are those difficulties? What we come across, and what are those that we'll cover in the slides ahead? And the last part of it is, I typically think of it in this way: is if your startup is not going to make money for you, for your investors, for all your stakeholders, then it's probably not worth putting in that kind of sweat and energy and blood out there. So somebody got to tell me that, okay, I may probably do some real contribution to the nation building, or probably everything would happen if you are in entrepreneurship. If you're an entrepreneur, we have contributed in our service factor when we were serving in army that time. We have contributed to nation that time. But when you have plunged yourself in entrepreneurship, the real contribution will always come only if you are able to create that kind of a wealth for all your stakeholders. Okay. Some of it might not look logical only on this one slide, but we would go ahead. I just have 4-5 slides to cover, and we will correlate, or I'd probably go ahead describing a lot of what all we faced in those typical stages of entrepreneurship in Profos, in building up. Profos today stands with a decent valuation, still not satisfied with whether I should go ahead with that kind of an investment strategy with this valuation. I would rather want it to be doubled and all, but that's a different question altogether. The real whys out there, friends, is rather in both these options out there that you see, whether it's your experience and a passion, either it's your passion with which you have started, but that passion also has to have a real problem identified. Unless you have a problem identified, you will not come up with a solution. So problem identification could be two things. One is your passion, and then you go ahead doing a lot of research in this passion related field and come up with the actual problem statement. And or for that matter, there is a problem, there is an opportunity that you come across, and then you actually identify the problem. If I may probably just give a small example, uh, last about 4 odd years, there has been a major traffic jam issues in Mumbai, and that's where I reside in. And there's been a major traffic jam issues in Mumbai, and especially due to metro construction and all that. I always used to think, because people like me who are absolutely careless about their food habits and not carrying a lot of food and all, many a times it happened that I was terribly hungry en route for, and I used to think, why is not somebody thinking, or why can't we think of delivery out there on typically on this traffic signals and all. At the time I was thinking, I was happy to see in next about few months I saw a couple of startups venturing into that system. So problem was there, problem was identified by me, but at the same time problem was identified by a lot many out there. And the way I say it is, at any point of time you would come across with 100 of the people thinking on the same idea. Once you identify the problem, the next factor that would probably help is the market validation. Market validation is, does the problem actually lie? That is, probably you do a survey, probably you talk to 100 people, probably do a methodical survey. There are hundreds of the ways to actually identify the problem. Once you identify and once the market validates that the problem lies, is to develop a possible solution, or you develop a product fitment out there for that particular problem. And then you go ahead developing the business solution around it. Once you have a product or a service developed to address that particular problem, then you go ahead with developing a business around it. That is, right from the day one, you do not think of the cash flow that is going to do for a first month, second month, 60 months, and next about 200 months or so. No, it doesn't work that way. One is with your product fitment, a minimum viable product or a minimum viable service per se categorically has to fit in, has to address a small market segment of yours, where you test it, where you improvise it, where you successfully look at it as a scalable model, and then you think of it of developing it further. Again, I would come to the core value why. In case of Proforce, the why was very specific. The why originated at me, but I wasn't very sure on that particular factor. The why originated at me is because I studied in a vernacular medium in Mumbai, close to a school to Shivaji Park. Shivaji Park happens to be a karmabhumi of Sachin Tendulkar and Vinod Kambli and whatnot, all the big names of cricket out there. Uh, I studied in the school. However, school was only interested in one game, and that was cricket. Probably because the entire nation was crazy that day. So from first standard to 10th standard, I didn't have a single sport being played. Reason, I could not play cricket. I still cannot play cricket to that level. So from first standard to 10th standard, I didn't play a single sport. But what was more surprising is, in spite of that, I never realized if I missed something in my life. So first standard to 10th standard, the PT periods used to be there. We used to go on the ground, you do a lot of toughery around, do a lot of roaming around, do nothing absolutely in those 40-45 minutes. Eat that famous vada pav of that Shivaji Park Gymkhana out there, which Sachin Tendulkar is also fortunately fond of, and come back having being happy. And I never realized if I missed something. I didn't play that kind of a sport back in my home, because the traveling distance was so much. And interestingly, after 10th, when I joined a military school named Services Preparatory Institute, that's one of the institute in Maharashtra which trains you for National Defense Academy. uh, I had to compulsorily pick up all the major games, and that is the time I realized how important is to have sports training in your life, not from a physical fitness perspective, but from your personality development perspective, because those 2 years change the complete personality, complete persona of mine, and sports had a major role to play. So somewhere at the back of my mind, it was very well engraved that tomorrow, once my son will be born, I'm going to put him into a school, or my child will be born, not son or a daughter, but I'm going to put him into a school where they would have a decent infrastructure of all the sports, and they would have a good sports training, and not only focusing on academics. So from that perspective, from that experience, when I came out of army, I had my tenure with the corporates for 6-7 years, and then I started Proforce, because in 2010 we had a disaster with the Commonwealth Games in India. in spite of Commonwealth Games being organized in India, we've had lot many scams coming up out of it. We have had not so many medals coming out of it. And that was a time when my child was just admitted in one of those schools which I thought I selected as the best one out there. Uh, Interestingly, school, in spite of having synthetic infrastructures of all the sports, still could not come up with any good results of any of the teams. So my child was still pretty young to participate in any of the competition, but the school was not showing any kind of results. And that started bothering me. Is school has students, school has infrastructure, school has ground. Still, why not those kind of results that we see? Probably the team representing at least the district or winning certain trophies, winning certain medals. So I started frequenting schools and meeting management thereafter to understand. And I was working in the corporate already that time. So I used to balance both the things. The only thing that helped me was I was in a sales and business development segment of every company that I work with. So that field kind of exposure used to give me some kind of tricky time to find out and go and meet schools. Secondly, is in 2010 when we had this disaster with the Commonwealth Games. So National Skill Development Center gave a mandate to Ernst & Young, EY, one of the top four consulting companies, to find out what went wrong where. So EY come up with a detailed report in 2012. But before I come to that report, what were my findings in 2008, 9, and 10? So my findings were that schools have a P-paid and an M-paid teacher, one or two PE teachers per school, depending on the strength of the school. Their basic qualifications are Master of Physical Education and Bachelor of Physical Education. They have all the basic knowledge of the sports, referee, etc. But a little bit of dipstick analysis in this said, less than 3% of them had played a game or two at national level. Now here we are talking about somebody who has not played at national level. We are letting our children getting trained under him. How do we expect that child to be performing at national level? So when I asked the school management, the answer was pretty simple. The board compliances, the education board compliances in India do not talk about a national level coach being employed at school. It only talks about a person should be P-paid qualified or M-paid qualified. Simple as that. So if the board doesn't comply, whether it's ICSE, CBSE, or for that matter, many of the state boards, if the boards are not giving that compliance, why would school invest in that? Barring few schools who are really pretty keen on taking their sports performances ahead, schools are not ready to invest on, because the national level coach or a national player as a coach would cost a little bit, rather a lot of more salary than what they were giving it out there. And generally that is acceptable. Schools are a business solution that is acceptable. So there was a gap. There was a gap is the coaches out there at the school level are not the same one that they should be actually teaching the kids with that kind of a passion. Coaches I'm talking about. I'm not doubting the competence of a PE teacher. As a PE teacher, he is perfect. But second thing is giving a benefit of doubt. If somebody has joined a school as a PE teacher and giving a benefit of doubt that he has played a basketball, say a game of basketball at national level. So it fits a criteria that he has played a game at national level, he is B-PED qualified and still good. But what happens at the school? When he joins the school as a PE teacher, he is told to train cricket team. He is told to train basketball players, which is his competence. He is told to train the table tennis team. He is told to select players for athletics. So these 3-4 aspects are out of his competency. His competence is basketball, but school's compliances or the school's curriculum or the board compliances do not allow him that kind of a flexibility to be sticking to only one game and training children out there. So there was a second gap formed. Then we started, or rather I started thinking about how do we bridge that gap. Then we started thinking about then there was a survey done about what kind of a salary expectation of national level coaches. What if ex-servicemen come as a coaches, all those who play in the sports quota for many years in their life and then retire early from the services, and instead of joining somewhere else as security managers or admin managers, why not come into a sports segment and teach the kids with the same salary or something? So all that survey started from there, how much schools are ready to pay and all. At the same time in 2012, Ernst & Young came up with that detailed report, which National Skill Development Center had mandated them Fortunately, these two match. So the requirement which was coming from a market, from the schools and all the survey which was doing was exactly being matched by this report. So I did not have to do a lot of market validation out there. This report itself was talking or creating a backbone of proposed market validation. It had detailedly listed out how many coaches are required at tehsil level for a dream till 2032, how many sports India should focus on, what are the high impact sports India should focus on, what is a sport ecosystem per se. It is not only about coach and the player and the equipment, it talks about the nutrition, it talks about the health, it talks about the mental health, everything around, about 450 odd page report. I spent another 3 months studying that report in detail, and this is where we thought we were on the right lines to come up with a concept of what we really want to do is to ensure that every coach on the ground at the school level is compulsorily a national player with at least about 6 years experience of coaching under his belly. Second is we will not let this happen as a PT period where there are 100 children playing on the ground and one PE teacher supervising. So we made a coach to student ratio or coach to athlete ratio of 1:30 compulsorily for that. The third aspect is the continuous requirement of equipment. So playing equipment it needs to be replenished continuously, and schools were really reluctant to be spending that because they would procure everything at the beginning of the year, and thereafter this procurement doesn't happen throughout the year continuously. So we took out that headache from the schools that we wanted to partner with, and we started providing all the equipment also. And when we had all these things in place, we limited ourselves with only, when I'm saying we time and again, because I'm not mentioning the other co-founders here, but that time we out there, and we limited ourselves with only 2 schools out there, and this is how we went ahead. So story thereafter goes is what we had thought of and what we realized that time is the team of reference and overnight success. So there is nothing called as overnight success in the whole story. I'm not going to say all the points out there, but few things and the entrepreneurs should be ready at any point of time. And these are the common story with many of the entrepreneurs is, am I ready to downgrade the lifestyle that I live in? It did not or it is not necessarily that would happen, but am I ready to take the plunge? Am I ready to forget my monthly salaries? Am I ready to have some of my bounce EMIs? Am I ready to probably travel in a non-AC bus or a train or something like that? Or the same time, am I gonna keep myself motivated throughout the week? At the same time, am I gonna keep myself motivated throughout the week to ensure that the dream that I have thought of or the plunge that I've taken in this startup is actually worth going ahead? Key factors of the journey planning, the grit, perseverance, and patience are the real time changers. I would say patience, yes, it comes in an individual way, but the grit and the perseverance is something that your market observes you continuously. Your key stakeholders, your investors, your clients will go on observing cases. How much is your perseverance? And trust my words, it is on completely self-experience. The moment you have that perseverance, the market gives it to you. Your clients will give it to you. In some or the other format, you will always go on getting those rewards. I typically cover with many of these kind of talks with, I've had this kind of discussion with Major Shetty also out here, is if the concept is yours, it is like a baby. The company that you start, it's like your baby. And if the baby falls sick in between, you really cannot have let it, you really cannot abandon a baby in between of a child. You would take care of it. At the same time, do not fall in love with the product, or do not fall in love with your service so much that you forget what are the improvisation points, you forget, or you do not take the criticism also in a healthy way. So those are some of the key points. We'll come out to the main points of it, or choosing a core team and a co-founder. Why do you need a co-founder is a very first question that needs to be addressed. Do you need a co-founder to as only a shoulder support? Do you need a co-founder to do half of your work and you do not want to work 70 hours of work week? Why do you need a co-founder? The very few questions that anybody for that matter from the investor side also might ask you. We have faced those questions when your co-founder is, how does a team augment each other? Is the co-founder is in the same capacity as that of a founder? Does he share the same vision? Does he share the same passion? And how do your skills augment each other? There could be two co-founders, there could be three, there could be four. So how does a skill set differ? Skill set of one has to differ from other, has to differ from third, and they should be so much augmenting. Say for example, if I am good in sales and business development, the other co-founder should be good in developing the technology backbone of my company. The third one should be a good marketing lead or somebody who understands the market strategy, because the market and the sales has to go hand in hand. The marketing strategy and the sales has to go hand in hand. Somebody who understands the market company. And the fourth co-founder could very well be somebody who is an investment strategist, who understands how to communicate to the investors, who understands the investor mindset, or who could be a devil advocate also for all that, to question you in anything and everything. But the passion, even being a devil advocate, it should not be a lot of negativity around. The passion and the shared visions are most important. Something that formed a backbone of Proforce as an entrepreneurship before starting a company was a book by Subrata Bakshi, The High Performance Entrepreneur. I recommend that to be read by many. It's a decade old book as a first version, but it still has a lot of sense. And in which he has said clearly is, whenever you choose a co-founder, he could be your friend, he could be anybody, he could be a colleague. The question that you got to ask is, if you do not exist in this world today, can you trust your children and a family with him? That should be a co-founder status. Can you trust your children and a family with him? I think that forms a very baseline of selecting whether you need a co-founder, and what kind of co-founder, what kind of shared passion, what kind of mutual trust, what kind of what I would say is the bonding that should be there in this. Rest of the things that I would say are very, very, very important things as far as the core team is concerned: the personal integrity, the transparency, the ability to question each other logically, ability to agree to disagree. Many a times when you sit on the whiteboards to strategize something, resilience is a key quality, because many a times a situation becomes too difficult to handle. Many a times situations do not have any immediate solutions to. So if the resilience of the founders and the co-founders do not match, it's going to create a lot of gap. Now you would say, or some of you would question, that all looks theoretical, and it all looks probably that I've taken it from some of the books, but I'm now gonna narrate some of the experiences with permission of Major Shetty, because he knows the entire story of Proforce so far. So when we started, and I'm again using a term, I still call myself as, sorry.
I think what we'll do is, because we're running short of time, we will move on to, we'll definitely carry this into our next conversation. I want to hand over the next session to Major Rahul, that is on bootstrapping. Just let's keep this conversation for the next round. Thank you. And I really like one statement of yours, what you said. The co-founder you want is somebody who will, rather, you can trust with, your family, your children with. I think that sums up, what you're looking in a co-founder. Thank you, Amaya. Over to Major Rahul.
So thanks a lot. I'll just quickly, I didn't prepare a kind of a presentation like Captain Amaya has done. However, I'll take it from my pitch deck, and let's talk about bootstrapping and how to choose a co-founder. And let's talk about, through this slide, let's talk about bootstrapping. Now, typically what happens is that the first year of any kind of startup, whether it's a brilliant idea or whether it's an average idea, the first year is always something which is very, very, very challenging. And as entrepreneurs to be, everybody in this session, you will experience when you open your companies or you've already started working on that idea, is that 1 year is something which is a testing time. And if you basically circumvent this time period, with the right things and the right steps, and the entire wagon that you are driving points to the right direction in this 1 year. This is the kind of a founding year, right? This is something like a foundation that you give to the company. So this is very, very critical. You have to be all the aspects of the what you call business, you should understand, and you should be able to drive each aspect. So let's talk about how the entire engine of Armor Heavy typically works. So we, as of today, are a D2C brand, a direct to customer brand operating online. Of course, the vision is to go to the traditional retail also, and some disruptive means of offering the product. However, I limit my discussion in terms of understanding what bootstrapping in my context means. The first thing that, as young entrepreneurs, you need to dissect the entire business model into logical parts. When I say dissect, I basically mean you just compartmentalize every aspect of your business, and it should be very clear. Once you have compartmentalized the entire business model, all these compartments, logical compartments or independent units that you see in your business, you should be able to understand and lead and command really well. As the person who is driving the entire show, it's very, very critical that you understand the entire game and be a kind of a mind who can actually command each compartment. So for example, let's see what a D2C fashion brand like Armor Heavy. So our vision is to be one of the great brands. However, every great brand starts small. It's a small idea. It's a very basic idea. Then you of course mature on that idea. So let's discuss this very basic idea. Every fashion brand requires awe-inspiring packaging, right? So on the left side of the screen, you see this round circles describing these compartments: packaging, button and zippers, labeling, badging, sourcing of the right kind of cloth, and then you require a manufacturing unit. So this entire manufacturing unit is basically your backbone, and you must understand this backbone very, very well. Now, the innovation in a startup is that you could, if you have the money, you could scale it up to a larger manufacturer. What I did is I didn't have that kind of money. So whenever you don't have money, you have to be very, very innovative. Otherwise, you'll die down. So I basically wanted to copy the BPO model. Now, what happens in a BPO? Everybody must have heard that term BPO, the business process outsourcing. It's a huge establishment. A lot of BPOs exist, and these BPOs internally are compartmentalized into various customer enclosures. Could be Fortune 500 companies have their units functioning out of this single unit, right? So like that, what I did is I proposed this to the manufacturer that I want a captive manufacturing unit. There's a lot of difference between an open manufacturing and a captive manufacturing. Now, why I asked for the captive manufacturing is, one is it will be economical for me. Two is I'll have better command and control. And three is there is no definition for made in India. Made in Germany has a very powerful definition of quality and very expensive goods. That's made in Germany. Made in Japan is basically very economical yet quality driven. Made in China, we know that it has a very wishy-washy kind of a this thing definition. But made in India has no definition at all. So I wanted that my people who are working on the Armor Heavy product should understand what proudly made in India means. So I require that captive mindset. So I said, I want a floor where only armor heavy clothes will be manufactured. And I want named people to be making them so that I have better command and control. So that was my innovation, copying the BPO, this thing industry. And then I compartmentalized this manufacturing unit and made it a armor heavy captive manufacturing unit. And I was involved in this manufacturing from the get-go. Everything, every nuance, from packaging, I've packaged my product myself, because you have to involve yourself into the minutest of details. You have to pull up your sleeves and actually go in the trench and dig the trench, and you should be able to actually know the nuts and bolts of how the product is getting manufactured, right? So from a boot strapping perspective, it's very important that you understand it. If you don't understand it, you'll end up spending a lot of money. Let's go to the next compartment, which is the digital facade that you have to make. So the cheapest is basically things like Shopify. So Shopify enables you to be an entrepreneur the next day, believe me. And I'm not marketing Shopify. There are a lot of other platforms like Wix is there, and other platforms are there with the like tailored templates they give you. So I did not go to a digital company. I developed my website myself because it's pretty easy, and I've got like good 20 years of experience in marketing. So I said that to hell with it, I'll do it myself. So I did the entire Shopify integration and all myself. Then let's go to the next. Now I wanted that my product should be economically dispatched across India. So I was looking for partners, and then Delivery, which is one of the good names, I partnered with them and Blue Dart. So if you see the marketing engine, the warehousing engine, the digital facade, I have compartmentalized this thing in one slide to understand what my business model looks like, and then logically uh, take the manage operations that I can myself, so that I can run a bootstrapped organization with a very, very little minimal OPEX. The company does not have any CAPEX as of now, and startups typically, I would suggest that you don't have any capital expenditures. Minimize your capital expenditures, because you won't know where the expense will come from in this 1 year. It is a very uncertain kind of a period. No matter what process you develop, it will still remain very uncertain. So have your OPEX at an appreciable level, but do everything yourself. Doing everything yourself will help you mentor others who join the business tomorrow, right? So that's a little bit of gyan on bootstrapping. Now, look, co-founders, the vision that basically I had is that in the past 70 years, India has failed to give aspirational brand. No aspirational brand we have been able to give. When I say aspirational, I mean a Nike or a Hugo Boss or Adidas, all these brands which are of foreign origin. In the 70 years, the home industry has not given a very compelling kind of a reply. So that is the kind of vision that I hold, that I want to be the next Nike from India, right? Now it's very hard for uh, to find a co-founder who has that same vision, same drive. It's kind of a mission, kind of a impossible to have a person who identifies with what you want to do. However, it's very, very critical that you outsource this ability. Like I said, like I am a marketing kind of a guy, right? I look after the entire go-to-market strategy, but what about the manufacturing part? Because I can't be present everywhere. I require a person who is an expert in manufacturing. He knows where to source the product, and also logically you have to dissect the business and see which is the guy or which is the segment where this person, my co-founder, can manage that piece of the puzzle very, very aptly. And you go looking for that person. Maybe you will find a person who is very comprehensive in running that part of the engine. However, he is not sharing that same vision. So sharing the same vision is the number one thing for a co-founder. He needs to have that drive. जिसे कहते हैं वो जो सपना आपने देखा है, he should be part of that dream, right? So that is the number one tick mark for me, that he should be part of that. He should really believe in the vision that I have for the company. Number two is that he should be adept and expert in that X area, like Captain Amaya also mentioned, that area he should be an expert in, so that I can really sleep over that area and he will manage that area in totality. So that is another. The third thing is the aspect of you relating to that person, whether that person will be a friend, a good business partner, a family guy, because you have to actually grow this baby together, like Captain Amaya said, right? So it's like a baby. So you require a mother and a father both in doing so, and the bond between the two, which is the co-founder and you, needs to be absolutely immensely strong. Otherwise, things will not work out. So these are the three things that I think you must look forward to while choosing a co-founder. And bootstrapping, in a nutshell, is compartmentalize your business into logical parts, be in charge of that each business, try to take out entire operating costs, etc., in a way that you can, and then make the OPEX really, really lean, so that the right money can flow in the right compartments. So this is my a little bit 2 cents on bootstrapping and co-founder. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Rahul. That was quite informative. I'm sure the aspiring entrepreneurs who are attending this would have benefited from both your journey and your thought process and Captain Amaya's. I will invite Captain Amaya back, and I want both of you to, if there are any questions, you can take the questions, and if not, then we'll close the session as we're coming to the end of it. If there are any questions, please go ahead and ask the mentors, and they would be happy to answer them.
All right, guys, shoot up. If you want to, if you are in a entrepreneurial kind of a journey, speak up, ask your questions. If at all, I think we'll try to only help you. Not that we know all the answers. We are ourselves starting up. How to select the one who is worthy? So like I said, I have a 3-step strategy for that. Who's worthy? One is the first important thing is, and I'll give it to Captain Amaya after this. The first thing that you need to find out for a co-founder is he should be an expert in ABC streams of the business that you aspire to be. He should be able to run one engine really, really well. That's number one. Number two is he should share the vision with you, and he should live and breathe that vision that you have seen for your business. And number three is that he should gel with you as a personality. Otherwise, in teams, if there is friction, then there is a huge problem if at the helm things don't go well. So at the helm, everything should be hunky-dory. Everything should be very streamlined. You should be working as a well-oiled engine. Otherwise, your engine will start shaking, and it'll move forward with a lot of reluctance. So these are the three things that you have to keep in mind.
by the time people ask question, I'll just share one experience of a bootstrapping.
How to get the patent, Captain Amaya? Somebody's asking how to get the patent. See, the patent.
Okay. There are questions flowing right now. What is the most important thing to keep in mind for startups?
Patent is a very simple thing. It's no rocket science. First of all, you need to secure that idea. Securing that idea is not that you secure it in a book and don't realize that idea. You have to realize that idea. No idea per se is secured in totality. However, if there is innovation in what you're trying to do and build, the first thing is that you trademark it and give it a shape, form factor in terms of a brand. And then, of course, you patent that idea. Patenting that idea is a kind of a bureaucratic process. I have not personally gone into it. However, trademarking is something for a fashion brand I have taken very seriously. Captain Amaya can speak about the patent laws. There are consultants available in India. Even if you Google it, they'll help you register your patent online. It's an online exercise. The next question is, what's the most important thing to keep in mind for startup?
And the next question too is, how should I get funded? So if you, with your permission, sir, I'll take on these two questions. What's the most important thing in mind for a startup? I would come back to the slide that I thought the most important thing in mind for a startup is why. Why do you really want to do that? Unless you have figured out that why and a problem statement, don't even think about getting into it. Because that's not the vision thereafter will keep on getting blurred. If your why is not clear, if your reason is not strong enough, if the problem statement is not validated by a market, forget about it. Last question I think that I see on my screen is Sheikh Saqib asking, how should I get funded? Okay. Interestingly, I would ask a counter question, why do you need to get funded? I'll tell you the mistakes that we did rather when we projected the entire proposed cash flow. Before even signing up with the first client, we thought that we would need 2 crores at least as a seed capital to start a business. From that 2 crore and the discussions thereafter with various investors, interestingly, we started with just 20 lakh kind of a funding. Today, after having spent 6 years, or in fact, for that matter, in the very first year after having received the funding of 20 lakhs, I asked myself, and that was very apt to be asked, is did I really need this kind of a funding that time? Because you know what, many a times funding gets related to the glamour and the success that you have. Probably people start correlating that you got funded with X and Y and Z. That means your business model is strong. Yes, there could be a correlation in that, but that need not be a benchmark per se. That need not be the only criteria. First and foremost, if you can sustain on your own revenues, the way I said is, in the very first year, we were funded nicely. At the same time, we had some 1 crore of a revenue that time, around 75, 78 lakhs in the very first year. And then we realized that these revenues were good enough for both of us as a co-founders to sustain. We could have downgraded. Some of us would have probably continued at the same corporate level and all, but we didn't have. The only thing that we did as a foolish thing is when we had capital, we had hundreds of the ways to poof it off. We undertook a over-ambitious campaign. We signed up Sunil Chhetri for our national talent in football. We poofed off a lot of money in marketing out there. This didn't materialize. We lost few of our initial clients. We lost a major client who was paying us majority of the revenue coming in from the first year. So everything went wonky in the very second year of operation. And that was the time there onwards, it was very difficult to get funded also because the very first investors who had put in their money were thereafter reluctant to put into a second round or third round or whatsoever. So the first question, or rather the first guideline that I would tell to anybody is, when you plot everything looks nice and proper on Excel. Unfortunately, Excel is not the business. The business models differ, the revenues differ, your month-on-month targets differ. So evaluating yourself, getting yourself valued on the Excel, getting yourself valued through different methodologies, whether it's a cash discounting method, whether it's a CA, whether it's a VC valuing you, or whether it's any individual or angel investor, there are different ways to it. The very first question is, do I really need that kind of funding? Does my product development need that kind of funding? If my product development needs that kind of funding, is my product validated enough? Is my service validated? Then only go for funded. Otherwise, think about going ahead with your own reviews. That's it.
Yeah, and I have a little bit of a stab I'll take on the question that was asked in terms of what is the most important thing. The why, of course, but according to me, the most important thing is, do you really love the idea that you've conceptualized? If you don't love something that you want to do, you won't be able to sustain it. It's like just working for somebody in somebody else's vision, right? So when you're doing a job, you are actually working on somebody else's vision, and you are helping achieve that vision for that person. If you have a very a good idea, but you are not in love with that idea, I think it's not sustainable. So your vision, the love, both needs to marry each other, right? So for according to me, the passion is also really important, uh, apart from what Captain Amaya said. The why, of course, is the most important thing. So that's my take on it.
So the next question comes from Narsimha here asking, what if we take up the idea which is already patented? So my take on it, Narsimha, is idea or a product or a patent need not be a business. Idea is different, the patented idea is different, patented product itself is different. How do you execute a business strategy around? How fast can you come up with a scalable business model, even if the idea is patented? How do you differentiate, or how do you keep, because every patent also would have hundreds of the bylaws of you differentiating your product in XYZ terms of that particular patent. You can always take a benefit from that, but how effectively you can actually scale up and how effectively you roll up that particular product into a market is something that's got to do a lot with the business than the patent itself. That's my take. How about you?
Absolutely. Whether it's a Facebook or whether it's a Twitter, whether it's the Koo app, all these ideas, no matter how much you patent, you can always have that flavor or a twist where you can change and innovate that idea a little, right? And drive it, like Captain Amaya is saying, drive it with ingenuity, drive it with a lot of flair, scale it up a little more faster. And if you, coming back to, if you love that idea, you will have flavors to be more unique. You will add a lot of layers which will differentiate you. So patent is basically something, kind of a blockade in your mind. But yes, if you are in the manufacturing game, look, whether it's a Samsung or a Apple, they have their patent wars going on, but neither can stop the other, right? So don't have this as a showstopper for you. Keep moving ahead. uh, do a patent. If it is already taken, add a flavor to it. I think you'll get your patent. So it's just about, दाल मखनी 100 तरीके की बन सकती है, बिरयानी 100 तरीके की बन सकती है, राइट? सो अगर आपको बिरयानी बनानी है, तो लखनऊ ही नहीं तो हैदराबादी बना दीजिए, नहीं तो नोएडा की बिरयानी बना दीजिए, उसमें कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता. बट आपको अगर प्यार है बिरयानी से, तो फिर आप बिरयानी अपनी बनाइए. नो, देयर इज नो प्रॉब्लम. There's another question is, I know the why, but I don't know how. How तो आपको ही देखना पड़ेगा. ये जो how है, ये entrepreneur की खुद की journey से आता है. ये nobody can tell you how to do things. If somebody, if you look forward for that how, then you are actually in a job. It is good that you go and do a job. You are not an entrepreneur then, right? So the how is basically the genius and the kind of interesting part of being an entrepreneur. So if you are struggling for that how, then maybe you just need more time to be entrepreneur.
I would just add what you said on that how is very rightly. If you are figuring out how is still, then you better be in a job and don't get into entrepreneurial side, I would say. But in case then there are methodologies to go along, Sheikh is or Saqib. One is the way I said is, if you figure out why, or you figure out what is a market requirement or a problem, then go ahead, talk to your possible clients, talk to your stakeholders, talk to the guys who would buy your product or a service, you would start figuring out what rate they would want, what rate they would. So first thing that we did in Proforce is we figured out with about 3,000 odd customers about what rate would they want this kind of a sports coaching to be happening in, or whether they would want this kind of a sports coaching to be happening in schools. So the way it has to be figured out individually by an entrepreneur, there cannot be a standardized book, or there cannot be step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for how.
As we are running out of time, if there are any more questions, you can directly reach out to us. Thank you all for joining. I want to thank both our mentors, Captain Rahul Rai and Captain Amaya Kochar, for today. I want to thank our partners, Reference Globe and My Startup TV. I hope all the students were benefited from today's event. Thank you for joining.